We have a 2010 Ford Ranger 4.0 V6 with a P0193 code. I'm going to show you guys how to put the rail sensor. That's what the code is about. There's a fuel pressure sensor on this thing that is reading high circuit. That means the sensor is open. Problem is this thing is kind of buried underneath the intake. I'll show you about where it sets. If you can see it right down in here. What I've done is to save from removing this intake, there are 8 bolts in this intake. It takes a T30 socket. Here's the tools. Pretty simple collection of tools to do this. Basically what I do is I'll remove 8 bolts. There's 4 down this side, and back in the back, there's in the corner there's 1. There's 4 up this side. I take the bolts loose, and then I'll raise the manifold up, and then I'll prop a little block underneath the manifold. That way I can reach this sensor without pulling this whole manifold. Show you a couple things here in a minute. Okay, now that we've got this manifold propped up, we only really have an inch or two above this regulator assembly to get the bolts out. I've already taken one out, and I'll show you a tool that I use. You can get these at Harbor Freight. They're basically just a little adapter that your Torx bit will push into. It's got a rubber ring that holds it so it doesn't fall out. And then on that adapter, you have to get this turned the right way so it's in reverse. You push the adapter into the gear wrench like that, and then we're in reverse so we can take it out. But that's the deal that'll help you reach in and get the bolts out underneath that manifold, because that manifold's about right up here, but you can get the bolts out. So I'll show you that. Okay, here's a view of the rail sensor still on, and what I've done is put this Torx adapter. You see this gear wrench moving smooth, and I'm turning the bolt. Pretty soon I can reach in, and then I can take that out by hand. But just give you an idea how this works. The area is pretty tight, but there is enough room to work this. And we're not going to take all day pulling the manifold. Now that the sensor has been removed, you're going to see this vacuum hose right here. Now what you can do with this is, I pulled this off with a pair of needle nose because I had room to reach it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this hose onto the sensor, and then I'm going to take the sensor and put it right down on top of that rail and start the bolts. It'll make it a little easier. You could do it the other way, but let's see if we can get this in here. And another thing I need to mention too, this engine's cold, and for any possibility of fuel spill, you want the engine cold, maybe set for an hour or two, let the rail pressure bleed off. There's multiple ways to get the pressure off of it. You can pull the fuel pump fuse while it's running. I just let them set a little while. I didn't get any fuel spill, but definitely do this while the engine's cold. Okay, to make this assembly a little bit easier, I've wiped a small amount of grease on this O-ring so it will plug into the rail a lot easier without any kind of a fight. I also put a little bit of grease on the screws. They'll go back together quicker. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to plug this into the vacuum hose underneath that manifold, and then we'll push this down into the rail. Now we have the sensor pushed down in the rail. You can see the vacuum hose at the back end of it has been plugged in, so we're ready to put 2 bolts in the rail and tighten it down. Okay, a little extra advice that'll help you. This thing's kind of back in a hole, and you can try to put these in there with your fingers, but you've got an intake manifold that's open, so you don't want to drop these screws. What I generally do is I'll set these screws in with a long pair of needle nose, make sure I'm setting them down in the hole, and then I can reach in, turn them by hand, and tighten them. So you don't want to drop that screw. This needle nose thing works pretty good. Okay, we got the screws run down by hand. Putting grease on the threads makes it really easy. Now with the gear wrench, we're just going to put about maybe 15 inch-pounds of torque. Don't get too mean, and just snug these down, and then this thing will be ready to plug in, then we'll bolt the intake back down. Okay, the vacuum hose is on it. Both screws are tightened down, like say about 15 inch-pounds, and then we're ready to put the plug onto this thing, and this part's assembled. We'll put the intake back on. So reach in and push that till it snaps. You heard it click. I did have the cam sensor unplugged for a little more space to work. Plug it back in. Okay, we're ready to put the screws back in the intake. Now we're ready to set the intake back down on the engine. This wooden block right here, I'm going to pick up a little bit on the manifold and then just gently let this intake set back down, and you can hear the screws are lining up for the holes. We'll wiggle a little bit, make sure nothing's under the manifold, and then we'll tighten these screws down. There's one here, here, and here. Like I say, there's 4 down one side, 4 down the other. Once we get that tightened, we'll be pretty much ready to go. Now, when we start these screws, I'm just going to use a 6-inch extension with a Torx 30 bit on it, and I'm going to hand start every screw and make sure that nothing's going cross thread. You want to get all your bolts started before you tighten anything. So I'm going to go down through here, and I'm not going to waste the time on the video getting to every screw, but this is what gets done here. We have 8 bolts installed in the intake. With this little 6-inch extension, I'm going to go around and start to tighten these bolts down, snug them a little bit. I'll go around in kind of a X pattern here. I like to wiggle the intake a little bit before I tighten. About 15 inch-pounds is all you need for torque. And just go around and get the bolts and tighten them down, and then go back and check them. Now that all bolts have been installed and rechecked and tightened, just for the guys that don't have an inch-pound torque wrench, you know, a 15 inch-pound is just a couple pounds pull on a little 1/4-inch drive. You don't have to get real mean with that. So next phase is we're going to turn the key on. We're going to make sure we don't have a leak at the regulator, and if all is good, we'll fire it up. Okay, we've fired up the engine. We checked the rail pressure sensor. It's dry. We don't have any leaks there. We've got a good idle. We don't have any vacuum leaks on the intake. So if you're careful, that intake will reseal, and no problem there. The great thing about this is we don't have to take anything loose. No rusty EGR tubes, none of the hoses, throttle body, all of that. It's a lot easier to fix. It's about 45 minutes. You know, if you take your time and do it right, you won't have any problems. So I hope this helps everybody out. Thanks for watching, you guys. Have a great day on YouTube. We'll talk to you later.